Hello, this is Professor Urbis White. Today we'll talk about roots and radicals in radical notation. So let's get started. I kind of got this started for you. Let's talk about it. What's a square root? C is the square root of A if C squared is A. Okay? We can say 2 and negative 2 are square roots of 4 because 2 squares 4 and negative 2 squares 4. So you have both plus and minus when you use the word square root. 3 and negative 3 are square roots of 9 because 3 squares 9, negative 3 squares 9. So let's look at other square roots. The square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 16 is 4. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 36 is 6, and so forth. It would really help memorizing some of these numbers. Okay, what is this principal square root? So do not mix up square root and principal square root. The principal square root is the of 9. It is 3 and negative 3. Because 3 squares 9, negative 3 squares 9. But what is the principal square root of 9? Guess what? That one is 3. It has to be positive. It's just definition. So make sure that you remember that. We show the principal square root with this thing, and I call that a radical sign. Or radical symbol. Probably symbol is better. Alright, then if you write square root of 4, that's 2 because 2 squares 4. Square root of 9 is 3 because 3 squares 9. Square root of 16 is 4, and so forth. And remember, the principal square root is always positive. So if I take the square root of a square number, which is always positive, this square, I have to write down absolute value of that variable because that variable can be negative. So know the difference between square root of numbers versus square root of variables. Okay, so let's go see and look at a certain be careful areas. What is square root of negative 4? Is it possible to have two identical numbers and you multiply them, you get negative 4? That's not possible in the real world. So this is no real answer. And I'm actually specifying no real world, no real numbers, because we are going to start studying imaginary numbers in this chapter. But we're going to do that a little later. What is square root of 2 square? Think of the radical sign and square canceling out. Because square root of 2 square is square root of 4. Square root of 4 is 2. It's as if these two canceled out. Very good. What is square root of x squared? X, oh, wait a minute, that's a variable. So I need to make sure that I have absolute values around it. What is square root of negative 2 squared? Now, you have to be careful. Because of order operations, you do that first. You still have a negative. What is square root of negative 4? Oh, wait, we said that before. There is no real answer. But look at the difference between that one and this one. What's the difference? There are parentheses in there. Very good. What is negative 2 times negative 2? That's 4. Is there a real answer to that? Absolutely. So pay attention to these. Okay. How about something with x's and numbers and all that? No problem. These two will cancel out. But since it has a variable in it, what do you need to have? You need to have an absolute value. It doesn't matter how big this thing is. What are you going to have? You're going to have an absolute value. The other thing that you need to understand, in your books, most probably, you are going to have a little note in there. It says it's assumed all variables are positive, or something like that. Something like that. Or expressions inside the radical are positive, or something like that. Because you know what they don't want? They don't want you to deal with the absolute value most of the time in intermediate algebra level. And then they throw the absolute value at you in pre-calculus. But just know that there's an absolute value, even though your book says, okay, just pay attention to it, but we're not paying attention to it right now. All right. Let's look at the cube roots. It's a cube root. C is the cube root of A if C cubed is A. All right, so let's look at it. 2 is the cube root of 8. Negative 2 is the cube root of negative 8. Oh, okay, well that makes sense. 2 is the cube root of 8 because 2 cubed is 8. Negative 2 is the cube root of 8 because negative 2 is the cube root of negative 8 because negative 2 cubed is negative 8. Remember when we were doing square root, we could not take the cube root of a negative number, but here we can. The cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. All right. Now let's look at the nth root situation. So that means I can take a square root, I can take a cube root, I can take a fourth root, I can take any root I want. C is the nth root of A, and assuming it's a positive integer, if C to the n power is A. Now you have to pay attention. If n is odd, we can take the nth root of a negative number. If n is even, we cannot take nth root of a negative number. And I'll just explain what that means. Okay, let's look at a couple of things. Let me put it in here. So let's look at it. Nth root. If I want to write cube root of 8, I need to put a cube in there, and that's 2. If I want to look square root of 4, that's also 2. Square root of negative 4, no real answer. Cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. How about cube root of x cubed? I can have a negative answer, so I don't need an absolute value. But square root of x squared, guess what? I do need an absolute value. So what you learn? When n is odd, you don't worry about absolute values. N is even, you do. When we take the nth root, you can take the negative nth root of a negative number when it's odd, and you cannot when it's even. So let's look at it. Negative 1. Can I do third root of negative 1? Absolutely, negative 1. Can I do fourth root of negative 1 even? No, I can't do that. All right, I think you got that. So let's look at some specific examples. Nth root, just be careful area. Square root of 4, 2. Square root of negative 4, no real answer. Fourth root of negative 16, what do you think? No real answer. Fourth root of 16, is there a number I can multiply 4 times, get to 16? 2 times 2, that's 2. 4 times 2, 8 times 2, 16. Yeah, it's 2. What's square root of x squared? Even, remember, than absolute value. All right, cube root of x cubed. Do I need an absolute value? Absolutely not. Very good. Anything other than that, but it's even. Do I need an absolute value? Absolutely. All right, so remember, even and odd roots. Make sure you know your rules about even and odd rules. Square root can never be a principal square root with the radical sign. That is always a positive square root. Know the difference between positive square root, principal square root, and square root themselves. So kind of like understand all this terminology and you'll be fine.